This is an interview with Manny Manzanares. Manny is a filmmaker, stunt coordinator, and action designer. He's worked on shows like The Mandalorian, Titans, and Divergent. He talks about his indie action roots, his unique entry into Hollywood as a Previz filmmaker, and how his process has progressed over time. This is an exciting interview for me because I've watched Manny grow since his days on the Stunt People Forum into the action designer that he is today. So it's been an awesome journey, but I'm going to let him do the talking. Like, how long have you been studying Hong Kong cinema?
Oh, geez. Probably in the time that I could. Like, I feel like in 98, 99, like 99, my family got a computer. So that's kind of around the time that, the internet was finally accessible to me. And we had dial up. And in 99, it was like, holy shit, the world is out there. Because I remember like going to the public library and just using computers there. My mom had to like do work or something. And in 99, it was all out there for me. And so one of the first things I looked up was Jackie Chan, right? Just seeing what's out there, seeing what was around. And that's how I stumbled onto that site, Project J, back in the day. And just, that's when I felt like I unearthed something no one has ever heard of. Just the fact that there was like doubles and stuff. Because I was religiously watching at that time. I'd gotten a VHS copy of the Tai Seng one of Drunken Master 2. And I swear I watched that thing religiously day in, day out. But yeah, man, that kind of led me on a path to just seeing every movie, seeing what the connections were that were around online, and kind of led me to all those like kung fu cinema sites too that were on. I think some of them are still up today, but I know there was a ton back then for a long time, like in the early 2000s.
How did you get Hong Kong movies before the internet?
So I was introduced to Hong Kong films through my grandfather, and the area that I grew up in Chicago, it was on the north side, like northwest side, and wasn't ghetto, but it was definitely, well, I mean, I guess it was half and half, but it was definitely like mom and pop. So like Blockbuster and those kind of stores, we knew of them, but they were in obviously more affluent areas. We had two. There was one video store called like Syed Video Store. Indian family ran it, and then we had another video store called Universal Video. And Universal Video had this wide selection of, for whatever reason, Asian cinema, and then obviously like Latino cinema. So my grandfather being a Bruce Lee fan, I think that led him to discovering Jackie Chan. And then from there, because he was actually a big fan of silent film and vaudeville, he was a huge Lauren Hardy fan, huge Charlie Chaplin fan. So when he started watching Jackie and Samo and Yu Miao, he was like, I like these guys. These are awesome. Like he immediately understood the comedy. And so he started showing them to me. So I want to say I was probably 10 or 11 when I think I saw my first Jackie Chan film without realizing it was a Jackie Chan film. Because I think, like many of us, I didn't know this guy existed until Rumble in the Bronx. But I was like, but this seems so familiar. I feel like I've seen this guy before. And then, sure enough, within the next year, my grandpa was like, oh, yeah, I've been showing you that guy's movies forever. Didn't you know he's a big deal? Like, I'm supposed to know, right? But it was cool, man. That's how it really started, was just the local mom and pop video stores.
What do you think the difference was that you saw between the old movies that you grew up with, the old action films, whatever they might be, and
Mhm.
a Jackie Chan action scene?
I mean, the main difference is kind of like what he always stated, right? Is a lot of the American action films, for the most part, were, one and done, right? Guy comes in, pow, guy comes in, boom. And, of course, a lot of those action films, I feel at least, like, for the most part, it rang true to whatever characters they were playing, quite stoic, had whatever problems with the government or society or what have you, and or they're just like, yeah, criminals suck, right? They come in, they do their thing. But with Jackie, immediately what was, relatable was that, yeah, like he felt like an everyman. He felt like someone that he was doing his thing, even if he was a cop, right? He was a cop that made like just bad choices. He's always teasing people or just kind of a slacker. And then all of a sudden, when he gets into a real serious situation, you see that change over time with the course of the character. So it's not like he had every answer. It's not like he, knew exactly what he was doing. But that's what resonated the most with me, especially when he got into fights, and especially as like the fights escalated in his movies. I would see that a little more with his pairings with Samo, but you relate to this guy, and then all of a sudden, towards the end, when he has to fight, like the single bad or whatever, the big bad, um, you want to see him win, even though he's probably gonna, get his ass kicked quite a bit. But you want to see him win. You want to see him, trump over what was going on, and there wasn't a lot of that too much in American cinema that I can really remember. You know, a couple of times, but most of the action stars, not to say they didn't get hit, but I didn't really always see them in like danger. It wasn't like the first Predator, for example, or even like Lethal Weapon, right? With Gibson always getting his ass kicked and kind of find a way to come back. Rocky with Stallone. Those were kind of the movies that I could remember off the top of my head where you saw a hero do that. But yeah, for the most part, they just came in and started killing everybody.
Yeah, it's almost like when the Western character gets hit, it's a big deal. It's like it's a big
Yes.
problem when they get hit. So like the next scene needs to be about them coming back. Whereas in a Hong Kong fight, there's seems to be a lot more push and pull throughout the fight. It's a little bit more push hands, so to speak. I mean,
Yeah.
a little bit more of two people making a song together, right?
Yeah, it's true. And I remember like reading, I have quite a few books on Hong Kong cinema. Because going back when we were talking about the right and wrongs thing, I remember over time collecting whatever I could from bookstores. And I remember reading about that history, when they started as opera, right? And they took the opera troops obviously to film. And then over time, that was kind of the norm, for them. But it made sense because, with the opera troops, they're telling a story. They have to tell the whole arc. I know a lot of those performances normally were what, like 2 hours, sometimes three, depending. So they're used to telling very long stories with their bodies, right? And I feel like it made sense upon learning that kind of information. Like you're saying, like they're so used to having that song and dance, whereas in American action, I mean, straightforward for an obvious reason, and a lot of their thing is more spectacle, right? Which I feel is like always been pretty true, even as we grow up right now, their deal is spectacle, but I guess for us growing up, it felt like that spectacle was quite literal and real. Like you always saw the big car crashes, you always saw the big explosions, but you knew for the most part those were real. So I guess when you kind of saw an American action film, you're like, wow, that's an American action film. Compared to when you saw a Hong Kong film, at least for me, like, you're going to get some decent fights, you're going to get some kind of character action because, they don't have those same resources, right? For the most part, at least.
It's an interesting way of putting it that you get more character action out of Hong Kong cinema. I'm thinking back now. You talked about vaudeville. Did you ever watch any of the vaudeville movies, and did you draw the same parallels that Jackie did between his cinema and vaudeville cinema?
It was my grandfather that actually, made those connections with me because I grew up watching. I grew up watching Laurel and Hardy. At the time, I really wasn't into it. I was more into Three Stooges. And I really remember religiously watching Three Stooges for a long time. And then my grandfather was also into musicals. So like Fred Astaire, Gene Kelly, Donald O'Connor. There's quite a few people that he'd watch basically all the MGM slate, that had musicals at that time. But he was the one that was saying like a lot of the slapstick comedy that those guys were doing, even in the Kung Fu cinema, when they started in the late 70s and were kind of implementing that comedy, he'd be like, yeah, see, like they're doing very similar things like Three Stooges. And if it wasn't for him, I probably would have realized a lot of that later, just by doing research. But that was pretty cool. Like even at that time, now thinking about it, and then obviously hearing Jackie talk about it himself, that connection is so deep, I feel. Like that's kind of, I feel like a lot of their edge overall. that edge of the vaudeville kind of comedy. Just I felt like that's kind of what put Jackie over the top, besides the obvious, huge stunts as he developed over the years.
Yeah, maybe Jackie was tapping into something that was a little bit more universal. Um, Sam comedy was very Chinese at times, although it was very funny if you get it. And he could also just do really good slapstick, and he would poke fun at Chinese culture too, which is funny,
Yeah, I did enjoy that. I feel like he did that really well with his supernatural stuff, which is like what Vlad and I talk about a couple of times, like Encounters of the Spooky Kind, and a couple other ones like that. I felt like, yeah, Sam was really good at poking fun of the culture in that sense.
I always wonder how much, if any, pushback he got for that. Maybe not. Maybe people just loved it.
Yeah,
Who knows?
yeah,
Maybe Golden Harvest might have been the place for that.
it's true, man. Like, kind of here. I mean, I can't even think of a studio that would even do that now. Having a. Can you imagine having a blank check and just being like, yeah, it's okay. But I guess it makes sense. I was just talking to somebody about that recently, like the output of current Marvel films, but just even in general, current films in general. And I feel like the output of working on a lot of these right now is because the content breadth has to be so much. They shoot these things for, let's say, 6 to 9 months, but the post is 6 months. You know what I mean? It's quite fast. And I was like, even with American films, in our age growing up, I mean, I remember a film taking a year to make, right? And then a year to come out. The post was quite long, even if it was quite a big action film. And nowadays it feels like these things just come out so fast. But I guess there's interesting parallels because, when you think about a lot of the titles that we grew up watching in Hong Kong cinema, a lot of them came out quite back to back. You know what I mean? Like they also came out quite fast over time. And then a lot of the interviews, especially in the late 90s, I remember a lot of those guys being like, yeah, I mean, they're making 2 or 3 movies in a year, back to back. Like there's no sleep, there's no nothing. Because that's what was expected, right? To stay on top or to just be, I guess, in the realm of whatever the entertainment industry is over there, which is pretty wild, you know?
Yeah, a lot of the Gen X stunt guys talk about that similar kind of cycle, just going from shoot to shoot in one day, 8 hours here, 8 hours there. You're watching a lot of these Hong Kong films. You go on to Project J. Who was at that forum that you can remember?
I remember Zero Gravity. I think specifically, I want to say Tony Chu posted once, but I think is it Larry the Young? Ken was floating. Onassis from Kuhn. Vlad would post a couple of times. It was mostly like you, and then a lot of the I'm trying to remember their usernames, but I feel like a lot of the guys that were on the forums on these Kung Fu cinema sites. I don't remember if Pete posted or not. I remember getting a lot of pretty good recommendations of just films. I think I want to say Project J spurred me to probably look at Donnie Yen at the time, because that was like what I remember the most, is not just talking about Jackie, but everyone just talking about Hong Kong cinema in general, which at that time it blew my mind, because I'm like, whoa, there's other people out there that like this stuff. To me, it was like in Chicago, there wasn't anyone that I knew that was really into the cinema aspect. People like Bruce, or maybe people were getting into Jackie, but for the most part, unless they were like a Chinese friend of mine or Vietnamese friend of mine, they weren't really into the cinema part.
So you're on that forum. Did you go from there to filmmaking? What was the next step for you?
Oh no, for me, I was watching you guys. You talked about, I want to say you linked your reviews first when you started actually reviewing, doing clips. That's what led me to you and your site. And I remember when you just had the splash page of reviews, and you would show clips and stuff, which again was like kind of unheard of, because I was like, whoa, this guy's actually showing like video clips. It's not like a random picture or like a description of a movie. Because do you remember those days, like trying to go off somebody's 1 sentence, 2 sentence description? So obviously you putting out reviews led me to your site. From there, led me to that forum. And I watched you guys, grow. I remember watching everything like from the Civic up to I think the one that really resonated for me, that click being like, oh, this is getting better. I want to say it was King of Kicks. When you guys were doing kicks, all right? Like, you know what I mean? Something about that video, I remember just being like, oh man, that was kind of fun. Oh, they're getting better. Like, that's cool. And then I just kind of wanted to see, because you guys were more or less putting out weekly like clips, something like that, really quick, like 10, 15-second fights, 30-second fights, if even. And I remember another one that was really cool was the house fight with you and Vlad. Vlad has the ski mask on. And yeah, just watching your guys' progression, you and Vlad's, and then obviously Zero Gravity's putting out stuff. Your form led me to Real Kick, because I forget if like Hargrave or Thayer posted a lot of their shorts. But I didn't start shooting until I finally got the guts to do it in 2005. Because I want to say since like 2002, I was watching you guys. And I think every now and then I might have chimed in with like a random tidbit of like, if we're talking about Hong Kong cinema, I might have jumped in with whatever random tidbit I knew. But compared to a lot of you guys, I was the baby, because, you know, you guys, some of you guys were about 2, 3, maybe at most, like 5 or 6 years older than me. I was born in 85. So, you know, I felt kind of the kid. I was like, well, I can't, you know, I'm not shooting anything. And I'm also not really like, you know, like these guys are shooting and then contributing like real facts. So I just kind of felt like a outlier, right? Just kind of hanging out. But it wasn't until 2005 that I started shooting stuff. And then I didn't want to post it because I remember people posting stuff and it was brutal. But it was a good brutal, you know, like I
understood. Talk about that wild west of comment threads when people would post a bad fight clip.
It was Reddit before Reddit, you know what I mean? Like, it was definitely, why would you do that? Or, you know, man, like, it was good till you did up with this, you know? It was so blunt, but it made sense, because everyone's comments never really felt malicious. It always really felt like I was invested till this point, and this is what took me out of it. You know, like I was invested all the way up to here, or I really wish maybe you consider this at the end, or consider starting, you know, like everything felt so, I guess, palpable with everybody's comments, because people actually watched. That's the difference. People watched everything that was posted on there, even if it was atrocious, and they actually took the time to critique it. And I don't know, like me being, you know, in my late teens, like early 20s, because I think I was 20 or 21 when I started. And just kind of seeing that, I guess, also gave me the confidence to be like, well, yeah, a part of me wants to impress these guys, but a part of me also, like, I want to learn. So, you know, they're going to say what they're going to say, but if I just keep doing it and pay attention, it's got to get good, right? That's how they got good, you know? Over time, you guys just paid attention, kind of saw and figured things out, you know? So
I think most of us improved.
Yeah, exactly.
Some people,
there were some ones that, you know, oh man, bless their hearts.
Kind of dragged a little bit, but that's all right.
Yeah. But yeah, man.
Yeah, all of the feedback that we had was purely like rote memory of watching Hong Kong films. Like, I mean, it almost felt like Confucian in a way. It was like, did you study the classics? Did you read the masters? Yeah. You need to pay attention to how Samo shoots this. Like, that's we true. Really, I wouldn't say we worshipped it, but I guess we did. I guess it was kind of our Bible, at least when it came to filmmaking. And that was, and a lot of that too was like, there was a little bit of Jackie, but I think a lot of us took from Samo without even realizing. I don't even think half of us understood who was directing half the time. We were just kind of looking at who was on camera, but the Samo's style of shooting and editing, I mean, I think a lot of us kind of took that.
I agree. Yeah, I feel like everyone kind of universally loved Jackie, but weren't afraid to also state like, yeah, but sometimes this movie's too much this, right? But I think everybody universally loved the action in Samo's films, not necessarily Samo's films overall. Because I remember having discussions about that too, like it kind of went all over the place sometimes. But yes, I think everyone unanimously was like, yeah, Samo, right? Wu Ping was quite big too. You know, I remember for a long time, there was a very love and hate with Donnie. You know, like some people adored Donnie. And some people were like, yeah, okay, this like new Bruce Lee guy, whatever. You know, like this guy always is trying to be Bruce Lee. But it was interesting because I feel like that allowed, I guess, me to see every kind of choreographer that was out there besides like the main three. For example, if the main three are Jackie, Samo, maybe even like Wu Ping, that, allowed me to see guys like Corey Ewan Tak, right? Meng Hoi, Ching Su Tung, obviously Donnie. There's quite a few guys that I was like, oh man, I never heard of these guys, or I didn't know that they did their own kind of movies. And so as much as like that worshiping kind of was there, it also just gave me so much knowledge of the layers of that. It wasn't just these like broad stroke guys that kind of ran the industry. It was like, hey, there's other good guys out there, right? There's other people that are creating and doing stuff. There's other genres in the action cinema that are there beyond what we know. There was a couple of people that did all the kickboxing forever, right? That we all started, and there were some people that were doing the shapes, right? All the Shaw Brothers stuff. I think Young Masters did a good mix of both. They had modern and shapes. And then there were some people that were, I wouldn't want to say doing Donnie yet, but I think maybe more of that Donnie flavor of kickboxing, which I guess I feel stems a bit from Samo too, right? It's more real, it's more natural. There's less kind of dancey choreography or less like sticky choreography. It's much more about getting a reaction out of the other performer.
Just thinking back to what was her name? Eastway, just like raw kickboxing, bunch of dudes in the Eastern Europe, and they threw cars in, which is cool too.
Yeah. It was crazy to see, like, I guess guys that we didn't think were stunt people, because I felt like a lot of us, even though we said we did stunts, right? Because we didn't know any better, but I felt like a lot of us understood, like, we're not really working professionally per se. I remember it being a big deal when we found out people like, even in ZG, were working on movies, right? Like when Latif was in Tom Yum Gung, I remember that word, but it was like, whoa, that was cool, like good for him. And the same, even like Hargrave and a lot of these guys transitioning into real movies. But yeah, you're right. Like in Europe, I think a lot of those guys were aspiring stuntmen, and we just didn't really know because sometimes, they shot in these crazy abandoned locations, right? They were doing like definitely more extensive stunts than some of us were doing initially. Like
Ulrich.
Yeah, exactly. Ulrich and Mike Muller were doing a lot of that stuff. Man, I remember what was that vampire one that they did? Like Rain of Blood or something like that Ulrich did, where he kind of used similar effects from Blade, where they dissipated. Even seeing stuff like that at that time, I was like, man, this guy's like using visual effects in their shorts and makeup and all that. Yeah, I wouldn't even think of dream of doing that. Now I know how to do that more, but it's like at that time I was like, whoa, these guys are full on professionals.
As you were making these indie films, what skills were you personally working on as you were going down through the years here?
I think for me, I was definitely trying to emulate the rhythm a lot, the rhythm and the speed of Hong Kong cinema, because for a long time I definitely thought that's as fast as they went. Obviously, when it was a little too fast, I was like, okay, they've sped that up, right? But for the most general part, I felt like, man, they're going hard and they're going fast. So that's what I thought it was supposed to be. And for a long time, I mean, as obviously fighting Bernal, right? Like for a long time, that was like, oh man, that's as fast and hard as we need to go. Over time, I learned obviously that wasn't the case, and to stretch that out differently. That was definitely the main thing. And then making the fight feel real, like have performance, have some kind of character, even without realizing that we're trying to emulate character. Because I think initially what happens to most people, well, at least from the indie scene and for myself, is that we just try to make something decent, right? We try to make something presentable. We're not really caring about all the particulars, but we are caring about if the action at least looks okay. And I think from there, the next step people do is performance, because then people want to be like, okay, well, I want to engage people. So I want performance and dance to feel, if not real, entertaining. I want people to be like, ah, that's pretty neat, man. Like, cool. For me, I guess like impact and stunts and stunts like falls and stuff. Because once my friends and I were more comfortable to like do stunts, because obviously I saw you guys doing falls and everything, and like contour was a huge influence on a lot of us, at that time. I was like, well, I want to do that, but obviously, like you guys, we had to figure out how to do it semi-safely for us, and we had no pads either. So it was a lot of like, we'll start on like grass. And I think we moved to like wood, and then we eventually moved to concrete once we got like elbows and knee pads, maybe a back pad if even. But that was a lot of the starting points for me. I guess now thinking back and then where I'm at now, I think that's why I was so stuck on performance overall, because it's like the connection, right? When you watch a fight, even if you watch a fight out of context, you if it's good, you immediately understand what's going on within the first 30 seconds, right? And you understand their stakes and you understand what the levels are and the layers are. And I think that's something that for the most part, Hong Kong cinema had in spades, in its heyday. You could probably put on an average Hong Kong cinema fight and you're like, oh, okay, all right. Like you're already in for something cool, within that first 30 seconds.
Do you remember, I mean, there was quite a bit of sharing of sound effects on the forum. Also, I remember opening up my pad bag every now and then on Contour and finding like new pads in there and old pads that were missing. It felt very communal in a lot. Do you have any memories like that?
Yeah, man. I was the only guy to have pads in our group, right, in LVP, and I did that because when I was starting the group with my homies, Jackie always kind of said like doing stunts, and I think at the time, yeah, like my stunts had already been out, and so did my story. He was very like, don't have anybody do something you don't want to do, right? And always kind of make sure everyone's taken care of. So I think when I had enough money, I put it upon myself to, get basic elbows and knees and whatever random pads we could acquire. Yeah, I'd always bring this huge duffel bag of pads whenever we went to shoot. And I just looked hilarious because I had this giant army-sized duffel full of random pads, just trying to make sure people are comfortable, just trying to make sure that people are safe. If we work with new people, we would a lot of times have them, wear pads in the beginning because we had to get them used to us, right? Like me and my friends, we could go pretty hard doing fights, like hitting and clashing, but not messing each other up. Like we would know that, hey, we can go and it's going to be good. But once we brought somebody else in and we went with them, they're like, oh, you guys hit harder. Oh, you guys go fast. And we're like, okay, we kind of have to slow down. But another thing, I'm sure it happened with you guys, but I guess as we started hitting our groove and people started reaching out to us locally to kind of work, they realized how much work is put into it. And a lot of them were very off put by that. I think they saw the videos and were like, oh man, this is really fun. Can I join in? And we're like, well, okay, yeah, sure. And then when they actually saw like the process and what happened, immediately they never saw them again, or they'd come maybe one more time and then they're like, all right, you guys are crazy. And what are you doing this? Not getting paid or anything. And I guess there was a certain sense of pride in that, in the sense that it's like, hey man, we know what we're doing, right? Like we know what we're making. We're having a good time doing it. Don't rain on our parade. It's like we try to let you in, and it's like, yeah, it's work, but it's fun. Like we all know what we're getting into. So finding other people from the forum or people that wanted to put in that time was always really cool, because I felt like immediately once you kind of connect with those kinds of people, it was very natural, very easy to work with. Everybody, even if they had like different upbringings or just different backgrounds, we all gelled so nicely together. The same with you guys, working with you guys was very easy.
I was talking to Jay about this too, and Jay made this really interesting comparison with wrestling, because in wrestling, there is this sort of universal language that everybody speaks in wrestling, no matter where you're from. So, a lot of that communication barrier is sort of like, you don't have to worry about that when you go into the ring with someone for the first time. You say, "Oh, my name's Eric. My name's okay, cool." We know that, and they just kind of know how to move, right?
Yeah.
Do you think that there's a similar sort of physical language of this Hong Kong style movement? And if you could put your finger on it, what do you think it is?
I definitely, for me, I definitely feel it is the rhythm and how how much intent the performer puts behind the rhythm, if that makes sense. And not always malicious intent. It's just in general, right? If they have to attack you, they're going to attack you. But I think the difference between a good performer and a great performer is a good performer is going to commit, but to a fault. A great performer is going to commit and understand in the dance and during the dance where to adjust. And it doesn't have to be like, oh man, I got to adjust here. And, it's like you know and feel it, right? Like you're saying, there's this invisible, unsaid communication where it's just like, that kick was a little hard. Maybe I'm too off. And then you're kind of like, hey, can you throw that thing? Okay. Yeah. Is it cool if I step? Okay, cool. And then you just do it, right? There's not this like, like you're really crowding me and it's like, even if you are, like, you understand how to adjust immediately, right? And I feel like, especially working with stunt people that have gone through that extensive Hong Kong kind of background initially, or sometime in their career, even if they don't like it, but if they're good at it, they immediately understand what that is. There's no second guessing. You just start working choreography and all of a sudden you're doing stuff. You're doing stuff together, which is really cool. And I agree. Again, a great performer is starting to fill in those gaps with you, whereas a good performer is kind of waiting for you to lay out the track. But that's where I feel like wrestling, because I've heard pro wrestling is like that when they start going through the motions of the arc of the story or whatever, fight or match they're doing. They do very similar things. They understand, okay, we're going to hit these moments and pops for the crowd. And then what do you think if I grab here? What do you think? It's very loose.
Do you have memories of working with stunt performers who didn't go through this sort of Hong Kong style training? And what was that like?
Absolutely.
What was that like?
Initially, being young and naive, like immediately my initial disposition was, these guys aren't good, right? Which is also like, it's a real young way of thinking, because it's not that they're not good. It's just they're, like you said, right? They don't have that background. It's no different than me not having a race driving background and being able to do any of those, which are super technical, right? Or anything with fire or what have you. So to dismiss that, was just me being, naive, and obviously stemmed from that Hong Kong world. But in the beginning, once I got over that and I started working with stunt performers and coordinators that had that background, but were like, hey, not everyone's going to do that. But you know what? Especially a lot of the guys that worked on martial law, for example, they were like, well, those guys would make fun of us on shows like that, but they would help us. They would tease us and then they would help us because they understood, like, got it. Some guys are great and they can adapt immediately, and some guys need some help. But we got to use everybody. We can't bring in our guys and just start doubling everybody because they're like, hey, that's not how it works over here. So they had to adapt. And, a lot of guys like JJ Perry and Clay and Jeff Wolf and a couple other, the guys that worked on that show quite frequently, I remember hearing their stories, and in person, them saying, like, it was nice to, I guess, like Samo and Stanley, a lot of the guys would never challenge you too hard unless you were good. If you're really good, then it was like, okay, you can do that kick. Can you do 3 on the same leg? Can you spin and now do this? And they would always kind of see where your level. And the moment you like had a hiccup, they're like, it's okay, don't worry about it. We'll just stick to what we had, right? No big deal. So hearing that and then understanding, like, okay, I have to soften my approach a bit and I got to help them and I got to find their strengths, help me appreciate the style more, and it helped me appreciate, again, the process, because it made sense, right? Like, you think about how many people did like Wu Ping and Samo and Jackie and Yun Yao helped that were just actors and actresses in fights. And then you kind of go and look at those old fights on a different lens and being like, oh, those people couldn't do anything. That's why they're cutting this way, or that's why they're shooting it from this angle, or, doing these kind of tricks here and there. But, when you're younger, you're just like, man, everybody's good. Like, how do they make everybody so good? You just think immediately that's what it is, right? Not understanding like how it is here with action or anywhere. It's all trickery, right? It's an illusion. You got to make people look good, and you got to base it on their strengths, because if you're going to show their face, you want it to be believable, right? you don't want it to just happen, just to happen, and then all of a sudden you're like, yeah, it looks good, but obviously it's fake, right? Like you don't feel it.
I'm going to ask you an intentionally stupid question. Why is it, though, in American cinema, why can't we just shoot around bad actors? When I say that, let's be fair. When I say untrained actors who aren't able to actually perform the fight, why can't we just shoot it like Samo did it and just get a shot here, get a shot there?
Right. I feel like you can, but you have to be smart at how you delegate what that it's going to be. Because at the end of the day, it has to come around, right? Whereas, like, I feel like in Hong Kong cinema and a lot of those international cinemas, it's much easier to be like, that doesn't work. We don't have time to argue about what doesn't work or not, right? We don't have time or money. So we need to literally change this right now. Whereas, in most American cinema, they do have time and money to be like, hey, why isn't that working? Let's talk about it, right? Like they do have some potential resource to pull from. Whereas I feel like in a lot of Asian cinema and some European cinema, they don't. They don't. They need to make that shot count that day. They need to make that sequence work that day. And it's like, hey man, we can sit here and argue for 20 minutes, or you're just not having a scene. So in America, that doesn't happen as much. And when it does, it's like, it's okay. We'll fill something else to fill that gap, right? Or we'll make something and do something else to wonder about that. And the difference, right? Sam, a lot of those guys could grab the camera and hold it and know exactly the moment of what needs to happen. And there's this immediate balanced respect between the cinematographer and the action director, because they're both trying to achieve the same thing, right? Whereas I feel like in a lot of Western cinema, unless you have a cinematographer that understands that language without having to say it, but when you don't have that kind of partnership or communication, it becomes very difficult to just be like, okay, that's not working, so can I shoot it from here? And it's like, yeah, my guy will shoot it from there. And it's like, okay. I don't want to say out loud that, there's a problem.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to help. But yeah, man, a lot of it, I feel, kind of stems from that.
So when you started working in mainstream films in LA, what skills did you find you ended up using the most often from your indie filmmaking days?
The ability to create, design, and then execute quite quickly, and sometimes literally. And even as we started doing bigger things, right? Like you immediately realize, like when you hit a wall, and you immediately realize like, hey, this isn't working, right? We've been at this now for like an hour. It's not happening. What can we change to make it work? And a lot of the failures in the beginning, when we get stuck and just wasn't working, helped a lot as well. So for me, especially, what always I fall back onto is like, what's the point of what we're doing? Why is it important? So what do we need to focus on to get people behind it? And how do we do it, right? If we're fighting for time, how do we get the most effective version of that? And sometimes that's much better than not doing it at all, or being like, well, I guess we're not doing it today. Because I remember there's an old Samuel quote, but it's true. I've heard this from a lot of coordinators. The most important thing when you're on a professional set is to make your day. It's bar none, right? There's no way around it, because you have no movie if you don't make your day. Again, a lot of productions don't have the resources like these major American films have, where it's like, yeah, cool, we can take an insurance day and come shoot the next day, or we can piggyback this shoot off this other existing shoot day. You don't have that usually. So you got to make some version of what you're trying to do count. What do we need to achieve and how do we need to do it? And okay, it's this, so cool, let's do it.
Did you find any of this was useful in Previz, and how did you get into doing Previz?
Yes, it is always 1,000% useful in Previz. I think especially Previz because unlike the final product where you're not constrained, but the limitations or the boundaries are clear, in Previz there are none. Technically, there are no limitations and there are no boundaries. If you really want to throw something out of left field just to make sure that the scene works, you kind of have the freedom to do it. And the worst that they'll say is, nah, I wasn't feeling it. It's like, okay. It's much better than being like, yeah, I couldn't shoot that because I didn't know how to, right? Or I didn't have time. and that never goes well, obviously. So for Previz, yes, kind of having no rules helps a ton, because if you get so stuck, for me, if you get so stuck in the archaic rules too much, then I feel like, I mean, you're essentially creating a flat product, right? You have to bend, and you have to be able to just kind of risk it sometimes. I want to say, yeah, my first official job of that was doing Divergent with JJ Perry, and that was in 2013 in Chicago. We had kind of done our versions of like Viz for smaller projects in Chicago, but that was like the official, this is a big movie. We have to present this for actors. We have to, figure this out and how to train them. So it was JJ, myself, Matt Mullins, Alicia Bella Bailey, and then we were under Garrett Warren. So that was like the first official time kind of seeing how the machine works. But before then, I just kind of performed in some of them, like in 8711 or things like that. Early on, I saw it as a nice, valuable tool. But I think for the purposes of what I was doing initially in my career, and I wasn't really trying to be a full bore like fight coordinator or anything like that at that time. I was just trying to learn the ropes. Yeah, for me, I was like, why do people do that unless it's a big sequence? Because, we're so used to, right, just coming up and making it up on the fly and just doing that. And it wasn't until I started doing it more under JJ that I was like, oh, it is like our indie roots where we do come and make it up on the fly. But ironically, sometimes some coordinators would be like, yeah, it's great. We took up 5 hours to make this fight. Now we need it shot right now in the next 3 or the next 2 or the next 1, right? And again, going back on the indie background of just, okay, I know where the tree grows, so I need to just lay out that track. I can't really think about constantly, oh, how is it going to take to do this or that? Or I can spruce up some things, but overall, I just got to lay the track down because that's the task at hand, And that's where that indie side helped a lot. Just get the meat and potatoes of it and move on from there.
Did you find yourself getting more into previs or more into performing or more into production after that? Like, where did your Hollywood career go after that?
Well, a lot of my mentors put me more into production and viz because, well, I mean, they saw me as a tool, to help their visions, right? But at the same time, especially credit to JJ and to Chad for being like, well, this is what it is, right? You go from pitch to execution, right? Pitch, design, execution. But in your pitch, you are still designing, right? For what is going to potentially get you the job, for what is potentially going to maintain the job, and for what is obviously you have to get another job. And that's kind of the path that they put me on, to be like, okay, so now you understand from the ground up, as opposed to just purely performing or even just purely, let's say, choreographing as part of a fight team. You're now understanding the benefit of why we need to pull these resources in this aspect, why we need to show these people this way, even if they don't understand it. And then it's on us to one or two things. We can either help them understand it or not and kind of push our agenda. But it would benefit us if we did, the former. If we help them understand the benefit and the value of doing this, even if it's sometimes pulling teeth, we are now setting not just a different trend, but we're breaking different ceilings. Because I think at the time when I was coming into stunts, it was still quite taboo to do a full-blown viz. Like 8711 was known for doing that, but they were not looked at highly at that time. The notion was, oh, they're telling the directors what to do. They're telling the producers what to do. And it's like, yes and no. And quite honestly, the notion was always to make sure, how do we give and deliver the best action for the product that is being put upon us, right? Or put upon them. If you want to show them a different version, you have to do a different version. You got to show your flavor. You have to show, hey, I took what's on that page. This is how I think it could be better, right? And if it were not for them pioneering that and showing a lot of us the benefits of what that is, then I feel like, there wouldn't be any growth. There wouldn't be anything beyond that. But yeah, man, that's kind of the path that seeing that and seeing the growth over time. And, by the time they did John Wick, like John Wick was the culmination for me, seeing that outside in of, Chad and Dave were constantly trying to show these newer directors or whatever movies they were on, hey, here are the benefits you can do of growing, right, your action. And a lot of times they would get on because it's like, yeah, it's not really what I'm feeling, right, in terms of the production. So, they're known for being great stunt coordinators and designers, but, a lot of the mainstream work visually was not as compelling as the vises they were doing or the earlier work that they were known for. So once they were able to do something like John Wick, that's all stuff that they've been doing for years. All of the stuff they came up with John Wick was not new. They were already doing that kind of choreography for years. And to now kind of finally just lay it out there, it really, for me, it was kind of like, you got to imagine, I guess, Jackie and Wu Ping working together for the first time, right? Or Sammo finally getting his big break. It's like, when that happened, everybody's like, whoa, where did this come from? But it's like, those guys for years have been trying to design that, in their films as fight coordinators, stunt coordinators, and they never got a huge chance to do it, right? So now they finally got a vehicle to do it, and there you go. Now, they're off to the races. Even though, it's a slog, right? But to put in that time of pitch, design, execution is the only way they were able to make something like John Wick. And then, now look at where their careers have gone in their way. So, yeah, man. I guess it's the same with us, right? If we didn't do all our indie stuff, how do we know how to do what we do now?
I mean, it's probably like being a cook under a master chef. You're doing stuff at home. You don't want to, or you can't do that stuff in the kitchen. And then once you open your restaurant, you start doing the stuff on your own, and then you get John Wick. If people are getting into Previz, especially in the production part of it, shooting and editing Previz, what can they expect in terms of what they're going to be responsible for on a daily basis?
Well, as silly as it sounds, and it depends on who you're working under, you are responsible for everything, because what you're doing now, having a product, and again, I'm thankful for this experience because, again, through JJ and Chad and a lot of these other coordinators that have helped me properly. The improper ones take advantage, understandably, because they're like, hey, give me the output that I want, I will take it, and then I will give you something back, right? Whereas the ones that have helped have a similar approach, but they're also going, well, along the way, I'm gonna make sure you understand when we're going down this road together, why you turn left, why you turn right, why you don't do it this way for right now. Doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. It just means the higher ups are not going to like that. So don't even worry about it. And that was truly beneficial, because being able to understand, I guess, the scope and the magnitude of what you're doing, it's not just, okay, make up a fight, shoot a scene, present it, which is, beneficial. But when you work on these bigger productions, they've already seen that. How do you get them hooked? Ironically, what we were discussing about in the beginning, right? The intention of what's going on in the scene, the performance, and, the arc of what that story is, of what the scene calls for. That's what makes it exciting. So even if the choreography is not the craziest in that viz, even if the shots are not always the best, you have a leeway because, they're already kind of looking at it like, these stunt guys are trying to shoot something. But when you actually shoot something that resonates with people, for me, it reminds me of being on the forum and having people be like, oh, that was pretty good, man. Good for you. Because you get to see that live. You get to see people actually respond. And then even if people don't like the scene and they start really discussing it, I'm like, oh, that really resonated with you because you really paid attention to this one moment or this one thing. But that's good. For me, that's good because it's like, well, you're not just watching it and being like, yeah, cool. Anyway, we're going to do this. You're actually paying attention and being like, damn it, like, I wanted, we didn't do this. Why didn't you do this thing? And it's like,
Yeah,
oh, okay.
Great feedback.
It is. And so that's what people, I feel, need to understand, is that you have the power as the designer to really change the onus of the film sometimes. Because if you give them a great pitch, if you give them something that makes them think twice about what they're trying to do, vision wise, they will implement that and they will take from it. Even if they don't tell you they're going to take from it. I think the thing that most first time Previz guys need to understand, which again I learned, is you're there to service them, right? That's the point of our position. we're not there to have our stamp on what is going on. We're actually there. We're basically contractors for houses, right? We get hired because we're good. We get hired because we're efficient. And we get hired because we can do the task at hand and adapt to whatever needs to happen. And then once the house is all done, everyone's like, oh my God, I have a new basement, right? So it's that kind of dynamic and thinking. But in that return, I guess the magnitude of what you're creating is on you, because production's not going to go sometimes, but most times they're not going to be like, don't forget this, don't forget that, don't forget this. It's just like, hey, the script's here, you have whatever you need, you have storyboards. And in the beginning, if you don't, you ask for them. And the irony of that is most people would be like, oh yeah, okay, I see why you need that, because you need to know what you're designing so you can create efficiently. Having the power to influence some kind of thing in the movie in some way, even in like, these big kind of corporate machines, I guess people just need to understand like it's a risk either way. It again depends on, okay, you've shown me what this could be. How are we going to do it? So you have to be super careful about how much influence and understanding in yourself, what can you truly execute? Because it's easy to set up boxes. It's easy to be in a gym. It's easy to design and choose stuff, right? Like our indie stuff. But the moment you start adding real variables, right? Camera teams, lighting teams, producers, writers, actors, is there acting, how many pages of acting, yada, yada. There's tons of variables you have to consider. So if you want to have an efficient product, you got to be able to make something that you can manage, right? And delegate efficiently. At the end of the day, nobody really cares how you get it done. It's that you get it done, period. I understand more than ever why you have guys like Chad and Dave and JJ pushing for more, because they've seen it in their backgrounds as performers and coordinators. They've seen it now as directors. They've seen it now as stunt coordinators and second year directors, so why wouldn't you, right? It's there to be had. I think it's just like every generation, it eventually evolves into something more.
What was an example in your experience of when a previs was used in a way in the film that was like most satisfactory to you, and like did the most honor to the action team that did the previs?
Ironically, when I was on Mandalorian season 2, and when Hargrave, so I was hired by Sam Hargrave and Greg Rementer, and Hargrave was second year directing, and Rementer was his stunt coordinator. So they had just asked me, out of the whim, like, hey, do you want to come out in LA and just help out on, Mandalorian? We just need some previs and some choreo. And they already had a bit of a fight team. They're like, you'll help run that with the guys and whatnot. And the first thing we designed was the famous Luke Skywalker reveal scene, which we didn't know that's what it was at the time. But it was just funny because I always think back to, I met Peyton Reed, the director, and then with Sam, and they're like, all right, here's the gist of this mysterious nothing scene. You have no idea what this is about. Be on this like dilapidated part of the set being built, which is really a T-junction. It's just a long hallway with 2 little outs. And they're like, go nuts. Show us what you can do. So I have 0 direction. I have 0 story output. I just only know a Jedi comes in to go after the child, right? And that's it. And he has to fight these, big giant robots. And just to kind of put something down and be like, I don't know, like I have no onus to the IP at all. Like, I grew up with Star Wars and I appreciate it, but I'm not a super huge fan of it. You know what I mean? And it's not to knock anything like that. It's just, I'm like, yeah, I just never got into it that big. So I guess to not have any connection to it and to do something like that. And then for them to, for the most part, because Ryan Watson's the actual stunt coordinator. So for Ryan Watson and then Hargrave to work together and then just kind of modify certain things, they kept a lot of the broad strokes, which was quite surprising because I wasn't there for the shoot because I was on a different shoot at the time. So after I kind of helped out on Mando, I went over and worked with Vlad because he was running the fight team on Lucifer. And just kind of see how they took what we put down And these, we were like in the back room of their prop shop at Disney. We were literally in a corner there's no mats, nothing. We're just like in the corner of this prop shop with this multi-billion-dollar, studio, just doing vises and whatnot. But that's what was kind of fun, was like, how can we make this effective? How can we do this kind of stuff? And then I guess for Disney to take and see that and take really good moments of it, I was like, oh, that's cool. Like, it's neat to see that they don't deviate that much from it. And if they do, it's a story point. So from seeing that from Viz to final was super cool. It was pretty neat to see how much they kept. Because yeah, as you know, a lot of times it's just chop, 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 and it's what it is.
Yeah. You and I both have worked on that show. There was a certain show that we both did Previz on one time. I wanted to talk too about you were going to India. Did you actually go to India? And you actually did, and you shot there.
I was in Hyderabad at the Ramoji Film City. So that that was an interesting time. So there was a stunt coordinator named Lee Whitaker, who's super cool, and he works a lot in India quite a bit. And so he had reached out to James Young and Travis Wong about having a fight coordinator join him on this movie he was doing. And at the time, the movie was for Rajnikant, who's kind of like the South Indian Jackie Chan. He's well known for doing a lot of the slapstick comedy fights, but also just martial arts fights. James and Travis had referred me to Lee, and then we did a visit jam, and then we went out for about a month to shoot this one sequence. There's technically two parts to it, but we had this big train sequence. The movie was called Linga, and we fought inside this train where the character in a flashback is basically fighting, I guess, the local militants, the people that were trying to go against the British government at the time. But the irony is that even though this main character, who's part of the British regime, being Indian, he is actually trying to help cultivate and preserve the Indian culture that was getting kind of washed over in the story. Whereas these militants are coming in purposely, messing up these trains or these dignitaries to be like, yeah, see, like, you guys get out of here. That's kind of the crux of the scene. He has to fight through this train of militants that jump on. And then towards the end, he fights against like one of the militant leaders. But instead of killing him because he kicks him off the train, he saves him. So again, it's a whole deal of like, hey, let's learn from each other kind of deal. And that was a really cool scene to do and design, especially because that was my first time. Like, I've heard those kinds of stories of being in India. Like, I remember JJ telling me, if you ever had a chance to go to India, try it once, right? Just try it, just see what it's like. And besides the obvious like culture shock of things, the main thing was how much time they had for sequences. Like, we spent 2 weeks doing one fight in a studio, 2 full weeks. They'd already shot their acting the first day, and then we spent the next 13 days shooting the entire fight. We actually got done I think we did it in like 10, 11 days total. So there was a lot of wire gags. There was a lot of different fights. We had to bring in, thanks to Charlie Rudapokimon, we brought guys in from TAG from Thailand. So they were great. They came in and they were super awesome. And it was a fun time, but it was very hard because we were there for, I think on average, like 15, 16 hours on set. And then it was hot as balls because we're in a studio with no air conditioning. And then when we're in this train, the train is quite constrained all the time. And I think the kicker on top of that, blessed our hearts over there. So they had a guy doing smoke, right? And, anyone in film production knows that there's a special kind of smoke that goes through, one, so it's not toxic to people, and two, so it doesn't, bring allergens or anything like that. And it's just easy to breathe. But in India, it was straight up charcoal smoke. It was a guy that came in with woks and, cinders and just started stoking the charcoal smoke while we were having production meetings in the train or discussing what needs to be set up. He would just walk through, like, we're all cramped 10, 15 people in this box, and this guy would just be like, oh yeah, hot stuff coming through, and just, fill up the train with smoke. And again, that's just stuff that was normal. Like anytime you were setting up a shot, there'd be like 30 people behind you just hanging out. And you're like, do you all need to be here? And they're like, but it was, yeah, man, it was very enlightening that it got to show me, because, Lee ran the whole floor, right? And then he also gave me the freedom as the fight coordinator. And it was very cool for him to give me that responsibility, and for me to see, like, kind of, I guess, like our indie stuff, this process works, because we took the fight by piecemeal. We never really did masters ever. So it was quite piecemeal, figured out what we needed to do shot wise. If we needed to modify certain things, we'd figure it out on the fly. They gave us the time to, set up for wires. They gave us the time to set up big gags, and have rehearsals, because Lee was very big on better westernized training, in the sense of like, hey guys, it's okay to have rehearsals, right? It's okay to test gags before we do it and make sure it's good. And then on the day, same thing, we'll just have one last rehearsal and make sure it's good for camera, and then we'll go and do it. So nobody got injured, thankfully. It was very well done, man. And it was super cool. And then I couldn't stay because I had to work with Larnell Stovall on this other show with Vlad. So I only stayed for that month doing that one sequence. And Lee stayed on to do the rest of the movie. But that was my one and only time going to India. But then after that, through Larnell, I worked on quite a few Indian projects, doing viz with Vlad, actually.
It's interesting what you said about northern versus southern Bollywood action. I guess in the South, it's not even called Bollywood. It's called like Mollywood, and then there's Tollywood.
Yeah, I think specifically there it's Tollywood, because it's the Telugu language and the Tamil language.
Yeah, Tamil, yeah. And they actually have a pretty, like, I don't know, I would say it's respectable history of like Malayalam martial art films back then. And they just shoot it like Hong Kong movies. It's the same. It's almost, it looks like, as if like Tony Leung comes to the US and shoots an American, Hong Kong style movie. It looks like that.
Yeah.
Except it's just, I don't know, I guess it's just guys that were inspired the same way we were.
It's true though. Like all of those guys, speaking to like the older stunt masters, the stunt coordinators there, exactly. It's like they were just inspired by that kind of action. Even, talking to the Thai guys that worked under Pana, it was the same thing. Like, everybody grew up watching Jackie and Samo. And even when Pana was doing his kind of style that he was doing, he was still looking for instances of where that came from, right? Everybody chases Hong Kong, whether they want to admit it or not. Everybody does, for sure.
It's true. It's kind of a ballet of, well, it's sort of like glory to the performer, I guess, in the highest degree.
A lot of times it feels like a giant musical, in the sense that they, being the designers over there, they want you to see what that action is. What Bruce came in and changed, obviously, is the intention behind that movement. It became less, fantastical and classical and dancey. And then once you get into like Jackie and Sam and all these guys, they modernized it even more, because they took after Bruce, right? They're like, hey, well, here's a guy that is showing what real fighting can look like, but it can also look exciting and dangerous and, fantastical in its own way. Let's now start implementing these different martial arts in our stuff. And then eventually it became not martial arts, but action, right? It stopped becoming action filmmaking, but filmmaking. Like they're making movies now. They're not just making action movies anymore. That whole history shaped so many different other regions of the world. It shaped so many different, filmmakers and coordinators. There's a ton of Western directors that know who, hey, I've seen this old Jackie film this one time, right? I've seen Bruce and I've seen this Samo film this one time. It's like the fact that these guys have seen stuff like that and can quote it, even if it's just once. It's like, yeah, it's a worldwide cinema. Everybody has seen it to some degree.
It's like Samo and Jackie, they took like the Bruce intensity and danger, and almost like they added back in a little bit of Peking opera to make it a little bit more like making a song, like I don't know if you can get any better than Samo's rhythm. Have you ever worked on a Japanese movie?
I haven't, but I've worked with some Japanese performers, or I've talked to some of them. You have guys that come out of, I want to say the oldest club is the Japan Action Club. And then, there's AAC, there's Alpha Stunts, there's Uden Flameworks, there's Kenji's team. There's quite a few like smaller teams, Karada team as well. And everyone has their own flavor. Some are very traditional, like they have still that very kind of powerful karate base. And then there's some that, stem more into not the pure Hong Kong flavor, but they're influenced by both sides, right? And so now they've modernized it. They have more of like a tactical or like a Shuto kickboxing kind of base. Like all of the acrobatic kind of live shows are still popular. A lot of the Japanese performers still come from live shows over there, doing like demonstrations and stuff that I've seen. But it's very, very interesting to see like the different styles. The Super Sentai style is obviously a very key one that people remember. Kamen Rider, Power Rangers, that's its own bread and butter. The Chanbara style is also very distinct over there. But yeah, it's very interesting to see. You kind of know when someone comes from a realm like that, just like how when someone comes from a Hong Kong background. Like immediately the movement and the style is just different enough, but they do interesting things with what feels similar, which is super cool. And that's what I've always really enjoyed out of the Japanese guys. And they always give, those guys give 1,000% no matter what. Constantly. They're machines. I think what people forget about, not even Japan, but most of the world, in the States, it's hard to get into stunts and it's hard to maintain consistent work in stunts. That's always a given. But compared to the rest of the world, we're paid quite handsomely, to do what we do. And a lot of times in other parts of the world, they are not, right? Especially in the Asian region. And so even in places like Japan and Korea, the people can make a living, but they're not getting as much money as a lot of us are. So if you're not good, you're not going to work. It's just that plain and simple. They don't have time to train people. They don't have time to constantly baby someone into the system. It's very sink or swim. So I feel like a lot of those places, they've gotten better about training and adapting things to their market. But yeah, man, it's still quite true, right? It's very sink or swim. You're either very good or you're working your way up to very good, or you're just not. And, that's sadly the case. So I think that's why a lot of those performers come off so strong compared to some of their Western counterparts.
Yeah. What's your beat on Korean action? That you're on that subject. Like, how would you define it?
Oh man, I love Korean action. I love that stuff. But I would define it really. There's a lot of emotional intent in anything they do, and I feel like a lot of what Korean cinema has brought. What they've done really well is they have changed what I guess brawling is supposed to be on screen, because for them, they incorporate actually quite a bit of martial arts in a lot of their fights, but it's not the mainstay. It's not the pure focus, unless like let's say it's a character thing. But it's really much more about what is the hero or the villain doing? Why are they doing it? Why is it important? How does this change the sequence? And they're so good about making sure like those base values are always touched upon. You immediately understand when the villain's on screen. You immediately understand when the hero's on screen. You immediately understand like why this person has to go through this journey of any kind in their fights. Their main thing that they changed was their camera work complements that kind of fighting quite a bit. Just like how the Japanese style now is modernizing in this very tactical sense, and they have a lot more like zoom lens camera work, very tight angles in their stuff that feels really kinetic and flowy. The Koreans have been doing that for years. And I feel that stemmed from when that industry was getting its resurgence in the late 90s, they had a lot of indie guys, right? Kind of coming into the work and doing directing. And now all those directors, for the most part, are huge, worldwide known directors. They boosted that industry quite a bit. So now Like the new thing in Korea that I've seen is all the TV shows have such high production value now. They're still kind of cheaply done in the sense that I'm sure they're shot quite quick and they're put out for like Netflix and stuff, but there's so much content now that they do out there, and they do well. Like they understand they only have so much money, so they just kind of go all in into that. And that's again like what I feel Korean action cinema does very well. However big the production, however small the production, generally fits the tone of the story they're trying to tell. And it never really takes you out of the sequence. It's always about supporting what the characters are doing. In 2015, I met Jung Do-hung in LA. So his big thing was he wanted to implement a lot of, Taekwondo and Hapkido footwork and boxing and all these other things that when he was starting as a stunt guy, it was very Taekwondo based. And his big thing was like, well, I'd love to do what Hong Kong does with their martial arts fights and really be like, this is our martial art. But he's like, we just don't have the talent for that. So he started simplifying a lot of the movements. But what he started making more complicated was the movement in between each move. So if the move is a big right hand, a big clear block, a big kick, it's what is this person doing? How am I shifting? How am I moving under? And it becomes very dancey, right? But in a way of like, let's set the track, and then how much can I shave so it doesn't feel like a pure dance? It feels like we're really trying to go after each other. So his big thing was getting everybody in line to hit their marks exactly every time, and really train a lot of their actors and their stunt doubles in that way. We don't have months to train like the Americans do. We have a day, if even. So how can we effectively make this person look good? One part camera, one part the design of the choreography, and another part the training and just understanding their lane. So it was very interesting to hear him talk about that. And then again, going on like what Vlad was saying, like the camera work is super important in that cinema to make it what it is. I feel like they do the best version of what I guess what would you call like Bourne style. They do it so well, because even if the editing or some of the camera work loses a bit of the shape of the performer, you still understand what's happening, right? You still understand the journey of what's going on. It's not unlike Bourne or like Taken, where all of a sudden you're flipping the other side. All of a sudden you're 3 cuts for a move. In Korean cinema, for the most part, I feel it's quite purposeful, even though it's kinetic. So for me, I was quite influenced to try to implement a lot of their performance work in the Hong Kong stuff that I was trying to doing indie-wise. So for me, a big thing, after especially seeing Vlad do it himself, was how can I take that performance aspect and appeal of Korean and Japanese cinema and implement that into Hong Kong cinema? Because the only time I could, I guess, find any version of that was either in Samuel's work or in Donnie's work, where it feels like the fighters are fighting and it doesn't feel like a choreographed dance anymore. It really feels like they're trying to take each other's heads off. And that's what kind of led me on a path to that. But yeah, if it wasn't for watching and getting into Korean cinema as a whole, I think I'd probably be still doing a lot of the typical Hong Kong tropes. I probably wouldn't advance as much.
How important was it for you to have mentors like JJ and Chad in the business? And not just JJ and Chad in particular, but mentors in general?
It was very important. Having people like them, Clay Barber, Chuck Jeffries was another really good one. Actually, thanks to Chuck, he was the one that, talking about Jung Do-hung, he was the one that helped me see him in person through Wesley Snipes. The connection between a lot of them, where they were all martial artists, right, starting off, and then they became performers, and then stunt performers, and then eventually fight coordinator, stunt coordinator, second year directors. They had mentors that were like, hey, if you want people to respect you, basically you want to do what they can do, but it's also for your benefit, because as you grow older and start to coordinate, you don't want to be that guy that doesn't know how to do that or doesn't know the right people to hire to help you do that. So it's better to start learning and experiencing it now, being younger, being like, oh, now I know what it feels like to experience these kinds of events, right? Being put on fire, doing high falls, being in a car crash, being on wires, you name it. So when I put somebody else in that position, I know exactly what's good and not good about that. And that's a lot of the things, JJ especially, but that's a lot of the skills that they would implement to me to consider, especially as I started becoming more of a filmmaker and combining that with becoming more of a stunt coordinator is like, yeah, how do you get the best of those two worlds? How do you become an artist, but also because of the liability that you have as a manager, how do you balance those two? At a certain point, you can't, right? At a certain point, you have to sway one way or the other. Because if you become so artistic, you're going to forget what it's like being a stunt guy. So you're just going to make these guys do crazy that you're like, you guys figure it out. I'm focused on, trying to get this execution. And then also in the reverse, if you get so technical about the coordination part of it, you lose the side of being artistic. So then you can't sell your vision, right? Because then it becomes so nuts and bolts that it feels flat when it's not. There's a lot of technicality behind it, but it will come off sadly flat because you don't know how to actually express that vision. So having mentors to teach me that and understand the benefit of that, especially for what we do, was extremely important. Even JJ would always joke around, but it was true. He's like, I get excited the first month, then I'm over it. Because then it's like, okay, it's what I thought it was going to be. I get excited about the vises, I start creating stuff, it's cool. And then eventually you start doing. The benefit is if you let go of that and you start going in and executing, you understand how to not just present, but execute these massive sequences, So like when he did his last movie, Day Shift, he had a 42-day shoot schedule. And that movie is full of action. There's a giant car chase, there's a ton of fights. And it's not easy to do that, And regardless of how people feel about the film, it's like I understand his onus of that. It's like at some point, if you want to create your film and you have only a certain amount of budget and time and resources, how are you going to effectively do that? Make sure it counts. It's probably going to come from your background in some way. And if you're kind of going through the paces as a stunt guy, just being like, yeah, I'll wait for my shot, right? I'll wait for my thing. It's like you could be learning both. You could be doing your stuff and also learning what happens on set because you're eventually going to have to combine those two, right? It's very easy to be like, I don't know what they're doing until you're the guy in that seat. Also now running, 10, 20, $30 million project. And that's a deal. So can you imagine having that money and being like, I want to make a thing, right? But it's funny because I've worked on enough TV to see when the director knows what they want and they're articulate and clear, there's a flow to it. And even if it gets crazy, there's still a flow, things happen and it continues to move. And they too are problem solvers, right? They're already thinking with you. It's true. It's a huge benefit to see what that's like on a bigger scale. And it's thanks to those mentors to push me to look for those. When you get to a point where it's like, yeah, you want to do it together. Going back to John Wick, that's what happened, right? They called in the cavalry with all the guys they knew over the time. They had their team, but they called everybody outside of their team to come and help because they knew so many people. So why wouldn't they? And each one continues to grow because of the same reason, right? They're only as good as all the people that they've known and been able to work with and help out. I would say it's super important if you can swing it.
Awesome. Couldn't agree more. All right, last question I have for you. What's it like being a father in this business?
Terrifying. I think mainly, and not so much of the safety aspect is obviously one part of it, but is more than ever now also coordinating is the time management of everything. Understanding like the work-life balance is none. That's just the truth, right? For the most part, there's none. And understanding when to push away from work and when to not push away from family, but communicate why I need to go away, what needs to happen. And communication is a huge part of that. And being able to, express that openly more, I think is a big thing that is important. Having proper communication with your partner, And with your kids, you as they get older, they start to understand and know. It's hard, man. When you're in this business and you get high enough, it's very hard to be like, well, if I stop the train keeps moving, right? How am I going to get back on the train? And I think the biggest thing for me, because I moved over to Chicago from LA, was understanding that if you have a base of some kind, it's much easier to do that, for me at least. Like knowing that I have a base here, when it's also possible to travel with family. I wouldn't suggest it all the time because it can be a pain, but when it is possible to do it, um, again, taking sacrifices on your own to ensure that everyone's together and it's for a purposeful reason. So when you do have to go away for a long stretch of time, the communication that you and the experiences that you built with them together are going to help, I feel, buffer a lot of that bad stuff that comes with obvious, work-life balance. And yeah, being able, I guess, to work to a point where I can be like, hey, I want to work 9 months out of the year and then I don't want to do for 6 is ideally where I'd like to be to some degree. I normally work 10 to 11 months out of the year. I was just working 9 on this one project. And I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to wait till next year. Just been at home, just chilling, and it's been nice because it is hard to balance, right? When you're at work pulling you one way and your family naturally is pulling you another way, at some point you're just like, everybody shut up, like, get off me. Again, understandably, right? Like, of course you're feeling stretched because you are literally. But when you take the time to actually just be like, you know what? I'm going to chill for a little bit. And then you get back on the horse. Yeah, man, it's a really great feeling. For me, at least, it's been really, really good. Like, COVID was a blessing for me. I always tell people that all the time because it forced me to stop and it forced me to just be. And for the first time in a long time, I was like, oh man, this feels nice. Feels nice to just not do anything. And not like not do anything, but you know what I mean? Like not be stemmed by the overarching web of work. And so that way, when I do have to go back into that realm, I can go back with a clearer mind and I understand more of where to let things go, and again, going back on the mentors too, because seeing JJ go through that, being a father, being a stunt coordinator, and now director, is like, hey man, just take them for what you can get and then move on because it's business, right? It's movie business, not movie friends. So there's nothing to get hung up on of like, oh, but my artistic vision and all this stuff. And it's like, it's important, but you'll know right away, right? When you're working with a group of people that allow you to express. And when you're working in a group of people that you're like, just do what you're told. So if you understand those, it's much easier to take yourself out of the equation when the time comes, in regards to family. And just be like, cool, I worked on that. Thank you very much for your time. Okay, see you never, Embracing that has been a real blessing for me, and it's been great to do. So, if I could dictate when I am away, let's say for like a year or more, if I do that in very tiny spurts for a reason, then I feel it's much more not just beneficial to my family, but to everything, right? Health and mental health and all that stuff. I feel like that's been able to dictate a lot of my artistic vision too. The last thing that I shot, this little fight with Brian Slur and Jay Kwan, like that's what at that time, just before COVID, that's what led me to that. Like I was on 3 different shows at the same time. And then I finally kind of had a break in between. I was like, you know what? I'm going to shoot whatever I want. And I went, and it wasn't like I have this crazy vision. It needs to be like this. It was just like, yeah, here's an idea. Here's something. Just kind of letting out all the stuff I couldn't let out. And it was very, cathartic. Like it was very therapeutic in a way where it was like, man, this is great. This reminds me of when I first went out and started shooting on my own. Just making stuff, having fun, learning things along the way, making mistakes, and just being like, cool. And a lot of people enjoy that fight. But I think it's because, again, not having the stressors of that work-life balance, just being able to be and do.
Yeah, I hear you. I kind of want to put one together of fathers and stunts also.
Yeah, I think it's good, especially for guys in our generation, because I mean, the older guys, a lot of the good ones I know obviously have big families too. But I think especially for us, because we came in our generation, you know, we came from a background of do it yourself, right? And you know, can't do that with a family, obviously. But you know, we're trying to still in our ways not achieve our dreams, but pursue our passions, you know, and pursue what we still like to do in that fashion. You know, how do we evolve that now having a family and adapt that? Yeah.
Not easy. And I think a lot of people get scared starting families too. And I remember
Yeah.
Clayton and I were talking. We were at a bar in China. I can't remember where we were, but we were at a bar. I know that.
Mhm.
And he said, "You should have kids." And I said, "Why?" He says, "Because it'll push you." Like, okay, I did, yeah, and I did, and it has pushed me.
That's very
It has
true, man.
pushed me.
I tell people a lot, like when I had my kid, you know, seeing them come out and holding them was transformative. Absolutely. 1000%. Just something clicked in me and I was like, oh my God, I gotta go work. Like, but you know, it wasn't that like I need to make more money, but it was just like I need to do things differently right now, starting right now. Just something clicked. It all stemmed from them, you know, because if I wanted to be selfish and do what I do, I mean, we'd still be slugging it out in LA and I'd be gone. I'd be talking to you from a different country at this point. But you know, I'm talking to you from home. And it's like you know, it's Thanksgiving week. I get to see my family and get to hang out and I get to see my kid experience that and grow up again being around a community like that, which is like, hey man, I mean, that's something money can't buy, you know?
Agreed. All right, Manny, I'll let you go.
Cool, man. Thanks a bunch, dude.
Thank you.